For as long as science has existed, its ethics have been a matter of great debate. While that may seem confusing for the average person, seeing as how they don't deal with ethics on a daily basis, it's a pretty common occurrence among scientists. Scientists come from all across the world, and as such, their moral values differ greatly. A good example of this is the United States when compared to Russia or China. In the United States, human testing is essentially banned, and even in the cases where human testing is permitted, such as in medicine, there's a pretty rigorous prerequisite before it's even considered. In Russia or China, however, human testing is permitted so long as the subject gives their consent. To the average person, that is, someone who doesn't practice science, it may seem a little outlandish to do any human testing of any kind, and I think that's one of the large reasons why in the United States human testing is so heavily regulated. It's for that reason, however, that I have compiled this little slideshow to demonstrate some of the inventions that are a direct result of human testing. I think this will clear up a lot of misconceptions about what human testing is and what is and isn't ethical. It'll also make understanding discussions later a lot simpler. For the following part, I've divided the audio channels. If you'd like to just listen to the music without listening to me speak, you can use your left headphone. If you'd like to listen to me speak without listening to the music, you can use the right headphone. And if you'd like both, just use both headphones.
The first example is William Beaumont. In essence, he is the father of gastric physiology. His lab partner had a gaping hole into his stomach and you could access his stomach acid. William Beaumont decided it would be a good idea to start placing food and other items into his stomach acid to record the effects. This led to the creation of a whole new study, and ultimately revolutionized the way that we see the human body. Next, we have a much more famous scientist. His name was Isaac Newton. Newton used to take needles and shove them into his eye. He did this because he liked to observe the colors that he saw whenever he did this. While not much came out of this research, it certainly still falls under the category of human experimentation. Finally, we have one of the most gruesome examples of human experimentation that we can find. The scientist in question here is August Beer. He is well known for being a German surgeon. His experiments involved the injection of cocaine into the spinal column. He did this to his partner, and he began to subject him essentially to multiple forms of torture. He would brand him, break his bones, and all of this was to see if he could feel pain. While this sounds like an incredibly gruesome and painful experiment, it led to the creation of local anesthetics.
With all the basics out of the way, I would like to touch on one of the key points I mentioned earlier. In different countries, there exists a definitive variance in culture, as well as what is deemed ethical in regard to science. In Russian and Chinese culture, for example, human testing is in general more relaxed than US regulations, though they still typically require an individual's consent before testing. Identifying these differences in behavior is key to understanding the differences in individuals' responses to the primary threat. One of the first comments on a particular thread does an excellent job of portraying this exact ideology. The user begins by identifying the limits of their knowledge and thus providing clear boundaries, without fear of judgment from others for not knowing certain information. Following this is a comment on their personal opinions and what ethics means to them. They then proceed to provide evidence and reasoning behind the response by providing external sources so that others may attempt to understand how such conclusions were drawn. The user identifies their limitations within the first couple of sentences. I'm not aware of the current legislation about scientific testing in my own country, Canada. However, I can express myself on the question. This allows users to clearly understand the limitations of the poster Reaverman. Within the next sentence, the user states their own views on the subject by stating, I believe scientific testing on humans is ethical if and only if either the subject knows what's to come or in the latter is reassured quickly after the fact. To validate this belief, the user mentions a video URL which contains content directly related to their opinions and the topic at hand. In essence, Reaverman appears to believe in the concept of human testing, given certain stipulations. As for animals, however, they seem to think that since animals cannot provide consent, any form of testing on them is unethical. This is somewhat in contrast with what the next user, Arrow, who took a more fact-based approach to the topic. He provided numerous sources, studies, and concepts without discussing their personal opinion. This approach gives other users greater ability to form an unbiased opinion. Even on the topic of animal cruelty where the user provides their own input, they will stray from directly providing their own opinions, instead stating facts related to the concept. Due to the length of some users' posts, I will be using generalistic descriptions of quotes. I will also be highlighting them on screen so you can pause the video and read them if you prefer. Arrow begins by addressing the claims and queries that they'll be analyzing in the response. The quote begins with, the US also restricts, and ends with, what are some of the regulations in your country? They do this to clearly identify key concepts that will be covered in their post. They follow that by providing direct quotes from numerous sources and citing some studies on human experimentation, as well as links to regulations. While many of these sites have no purpose as far as furthering Arrow's argument, it does allow other users to draw their own conclusions on that topic. This widely speaks to the character of the users on this platform, primarily because their main objective does not seem to be pushing their own ideology or thinking styles, but rather the spread of information that allows other users to draw their own conclusions, sans being biased. This topic of diversity brings this discussion to its final two users who replied on this forum, MS3030 and Grzegorz. In contrast to prior users, these two are not scientists. They have a passion for science, as is evident by the vocabulary length and content of their replies, though they did not go into as much detail or effort with their replies. However, they still felt the desire to provide input and to share their own opinions free of judgment. Both users addressed similarities in their thoughts and that of others in a respectful manner without any form of abuse or vile verbatim. It is this action that concludes the analysis of Lab Coats Anonymous and its users, in demonstrating not only the user's ability to peacefully share information and opinions, but the freedom of average users to discuss their own opinions free of judgment.